My guest today is Britt Bennett, an American writer, author of the novel The Vanishing Half. Britt Bennett writes both fiction and non-fiction. In 2016, her debut novel, The Mothers, became an instant New York Times bestseller. Britt Bennett was at that time only 26 years old. In 2020, Britt Bennett published an amazing new novel, The Vanishing Half, that was a huge and constant bestseller, one of the New York Times 10 best books of last year, and not long ago it was shortlisted for British Book Awards. Welcome, Britt Bennett.
Hi, thank you.
Tell me, what does this novel mean for you?
What does the novel mean for me, you said?
Yes.
I think to me, I wanted to write a book that was about a complicated family and to write about these twin sisters who have a very complicated relationship. And in doing that, in order to ask larger questions that I was interested in about identity and the self, how do we form the people that we eventually become?
For me, it was a novel about identity, about how we became, what makes us us, in fact. It kept me wondering why in the general puzzle of our life, certain parts of it became more important than other. In fact, why and how certain parts became so essential that they shape our future. Would you like to tell us in some words what the story is about a little bit? For the Romanian readers, it's The Vanishing Half, Jumătatea, dispărută. It has just came out.
Yeah, so the story is about Desiree and Stella, who are identical twin sisters, and they grow up inseparably as children, but as adults, they decide to live their lives in two very different directions, one as a white woman and one as a Black woman. So the story begins from that relationship between those twins that are separated, and then later sort of follows their lives as they get older, the lives of their children into the next generation, as we see how this entire family has been shaped by the decisions that these two women have made.
In fact, Stella and Desiree have a very heavy and tragic past, and their past and their poor present, in fact, push them to leave their home, to disappear from the town, and to try to find a better life in New Orleans. It's just there that Desiree continues to live as a Black woman, and Stella decides to pass as white. In fact, both Stella and Desiree, like all the people in their town, in fact, have a very light skin. It's, the main question it raises is it possible to erase the past in the name of a better future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me was one of the questions that I was really interested in, because I think that there's a very long history of passing in America, in American culture, and the American history, not just Black people, but people who are Jewish, for example, changing their names so that they could pass as someone who is not Jewish, or people from various different backgrounds passing in some way. So that they can either achieve opportunities or escape persecution. There's such a long history of that, I think, particularly in America. So I was fascinated by the idea of these women being faced with that choice and each choosing something different. One of them decides to pass, one of them decides not to. So then the question for me became, okay, once you've made that choice, how does that affect you? Can you move on from it? Can you completely absorb yourself into a whole new world and leave behind everyone that you once knew and everything that you ever thought about yourself? Is it possible to completely shed that, or do parts of your past kind of follow you even as you try to move on into a new world?
It is very interesting what you said, because For a Romanian reader, another way of approaching this multi-generational saga is to read it as a historical novel. In fact, in the American culture, as you just say, passing as white was initially, when was possible, a way of escaping segregation, a way of gaining freedom. In the 21st century, on the other part, passing as white is become more controversial. It's often seen as a rejection of blackness, family, culture. What I want to say is that as a social phenomenon, passing as has moral implication. Or, however, the force of the vanishing half consists of not being a judgmental novel. How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is, I think even in the historical context, I think there are probably lots of people who would judge even then, people who were passing. So I think that I think it's always been a very morally complicated choice that people make. I think for me, I wanted to avoid falling into that trap of writing from a place of judgment, mostly because I don't find that interesting to only write in order to determine whether a character is good or bad, or whether they're wrong or right. To me, that's just a boring way to write and a boring way to read. So I wanted to avoid that. And I think in response to how I tried to do it, I mostly just wanted to think about what everybody's choices are based in. What's the context of somebody making this decision? How does Stella rationalize this decision to herself? How does she understand the choice that she's making? And, for me, whenever I'm reading, I always want to be able to empathize with the character, try to understand where they're coming from, even if they are making choices that I would not make myself, or choices that I think are not great choices. I always just want to understand why that person is making that choice and how it makes sense in their own brain. And I think that that's all you can do as a reader or as a writer, is provide that information for the reader and allow them to make their own decisions or judgments about the character.
Stella is an amazing character, in fact, because she suffers these moral decisions, this choice of her as passing as white. In fact, she is constantly torn between passing as a game, because it starts just as a game, and passing as a betrayal of the deepest self. It is very touching how this choice affects her.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to think about that evolution that you just described, that in the beginning for her, passing is something that feels like a game. It's fun because she has rebelled and she has gotten away with something that she is not supposed to get away with. And that's all that she thinks of it. But then again, I wanted to think about, like, how does that become one small choice that leads to these other decisions that end up changing the course of her life? How does this sort of one small choice of doing something just to see if you can end up changing the trajectory of not only your life, but also the lives of everyone in your family?
I often have the impression that the novel is a fable that is like a kind of folk tale. It has just many narrative extravagances. Just to mention one of them, Malar, the city where Stella and Desiree were born, is one that cannot be found on the map. It's mentioned often during the novel that Malar cannot be located there. Is it an utopic city? That reminds me a little bit about Macondo from 100 Years of Solitude, the novel of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Did you intend to include a little bit of fantastic realism here?
Yeah, I don't think I intended it at first. And then I think in the very beginning of writing the book, I thought I was just writing something that would feel realistic and historical. And I think as I continued writing it, I began to realize the absurdity of a lot of the sort of setup for the story, that there was something absurd about it, that there was something that felt mythological about it. There was something that felt like folklore, as you said. It didn't feel like a realist book as I continued writing it. So I wanted to lean into that and have fun with that and sort of play into those elements of the story, that there's something about the world of the book and the story itself that does not read as like strictly realist. So I wanted to lean into that. But I also think, as I said, to me, it spoke to the inherent absurdity of race and racial categories, and playing into the fact that the world itself doesn't feel quite, grounded. To me, that played into the absurdity of what I was writing about and thinking about, which is, the ways that these racial categories are made up, and yet they affect our lives in these very real ways.
I liked very much the title, The Vanishing Half. It could seem a very simple title, but at the same, we struggle to find the best version into the Romanian language. Why this title? Do you think that hiding some part of ourselves leads to erasing this part completely?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the title because it spoke to a lot of different elements of the book and the themes of the story. I think the most obvious and the most literal interpretation is, of course, Stella being the vanishing half of Desiree, and Stella's sort of side of the family disappearing into whiteness. So there's that reading of it for sure. But I think a lot of these characters are experiencing these moments of transformation and change. So, to me, it spoke to a lot of the different characters, a lot of the different storylines. And I think that your second question, I think, is another question that I was interested in, of what does this do to you over time if you have decided to adapt a new persona or a new personality, if you've decided to embrace one side of yourself at the expense of another side of yourself, what happens to you over time as you're beginning to transform into a different person?
In fact, concerning this general question of characters, when I read a novel, I kept wondering who is the main character. It was my reading, in fact, because I have loved a lot both Stella and Desiree. I got very attracted to Jude, for example, Desiree's daughter. And there are also other characters that are very, very interesting and appealing. While writing this book, have you become more attached to a character than others?
Yeah, I think in a bit, but I think like what I enjoyed about this book is that it felt like there was no main character. I think in the beginning it sort of feels like, okay, the main character will be Desiree, and then the story kind of passes the baton to the next person, and then the next person takes over, and then it passes the baton to the next person. And to me, that was, I think, something I enjoyed about writing the book that kept me very excited, because I never knew kind of what character I would spend time with at that time. And I think it's partly why I think I have deep affection for all of these characters, because I got to spend so much time with each of them as I was writing the book.
In fact, I think that even the reader becomes at a certain moment, has this feeling of becoming character in your book, because even the manner that how you write the book, you ask the reader to be there and to put together different pieces of history. The novel happens on a span of 20 years, and it's very interesting to be part of it, not only enjoying it, but also combine the story and making a unity, and at the same time, I don't know, having always this impression that something is vanishing.
Thank you.
The novel conveys the corrosive effects of secrets, but on the other hand, I think that everyone does have secrets, and I even think that everyone must have secrets. In order to become yourself, you have to come at some point in our life, the protective connection with others. My question is, do you think that secrets are just poisonous? Do you think that our secrets can damage the lives of those we love?
Yeah, I love secrets when it comes to storytelling. My first book was about a secret, and I love the idea of secret keeping or secret sharing. I think is also a really fascinating thing to me, of who do we decide to let in on our secrets. And I think this book you see both of those things. You see some characters that are keeping these secrets that do kind of eat away at them for over time. And then you see other characters who are sharing a secret with each other, and that builds the relationship, that shows trust between those two people, because I'm telling you something about me that I haven't told anyone. And now we have a relationship of trust between us. So I like watching characters move between those modes. I do think that we all have secrets, and I don't think secrets are inherently bad. I do think it's good to keep some things to yourself, or some things that maybe only a few people know about you. I think that feels to me very healthy. But I do think there are, characters in this book that are, struggling with the fact, like struggling under the weight of their own secrets. And it can be very lonely to have a secret, to feel like you can't tell anybody something about yourself. So I think secrets are really complicated, but I love the idea of secrets as engines for story, because I think that it's always a fascinating thing to think about, what is this character not telling somebody?
Mm. This character, Heather, the Stella's daughter, was a very challenging character, because she has everything she wants to have, but at the same time, she cannot find herself a long time in her life, because the secrets her mother kept was, in a secret manner, her secrets. It's without her knowing it, without being aware of it.
Yeah, I think, that character is definitely the character that readers love to hate the most, I would say. And I understand why she is a character that does kind of get on people's nerves, or gets under your skin a bit, because as you said, she does have, she's born into so much privilege and wealth, and is, a very entitled character. But at the same time, for me, the moment that she became really sympathetic was thinking about what you said, that this is a character who has a mother who is keeping her at a distance, and she doesn't understand why her mother has kept her at that distance, because she does not know the secrets that her mother has been keeping for all of these years. So I began to think, what would it be like to be that daughter, even though you're born into all of this wealth and privilege, even though you have every opportunity you could ever ask for, you are not able to be close to the one person that you want to be close to. And that's something that became really heartbreaking to think about.
Mm-hmm. The tragic side of the story is that, in fact, in a novel about choices, this character, Heather, cannot make choices, in fact.
Yes, exactly. I mean, exactly. And I think, that question of what does it mean to be able to make a choice is a complicated thing, and you may see somebody from the outside, they look like they have every opportunity available to them. But at the same time, to me, that character is one of the most trapped characters in the book, even though she should feel, free to be able to make whatever choice she wants to make, because she doesn't have the relationships to either her mother or to herself even. She's the character who feels the most disconnected from who she is.
When did you discover your passion for writing?
Pretty young. I was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I've always loved books. I loved reading, and I would, write little stories or write plays to do at school. I always loved the idea of storytelling, and it was something that I did from a very young age.
It is wonderful. So it was an early choice in your life.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know, would you like probably to read some fragment from the book in order to invite our readers? We have the same cover of the books.
Yes. Sure.
It is amazing. Was it you who chose this cover?
No, they asked my opinion once they presented us. This was like one of the first covers that my publisher presented us, and asked what we thought about it. And yeah, we loved the idea. That was a very striking and bright and cover that they came up with, and yeah, so we really enjoyed it once they showed it to us. I'm just very lucky that I've had very talented cover artists in my career.
Yeah, I like it so much that it became the main cover also.
Yes. So yeah, I'll read a section from, this is kind of towards the end of the book, but this is from Stella's point of view, and this also gives us a glimpse into her relationship with her daughter and the complexity of that relationship. Like leaving, the hardest part of returning was deciding to. For months, she tried to imagine any other way, but she was desperate. She hadn't heard from her daughter since she'd visited from New York City with a photograph, and Stella found herself staring directly at her past. She didn't remember taking a picture at her daddy's funeral, but then again, she didn't remember much of that day. That itchy black lace scraping against her legs, a pinch of pound cake, spongy and sweet, a closed casket, Desiree pressed into her side, her sister somehow knowing what she wanted to say, even if she couldn't. In the backyard, staring down at that photograph, she fell just as silent. She knew, before she even opened her mouth, that she would lie the same way she'd always lied, but this time, her daughter wouldn't believe her. It's like you're incapable of telling the truth, Kennedy said. You don't know how to do anything but lie. For months, she'd refused Stella's phone calls. Stella left messages on the answering machine, humiliated by the thought of smug Franz listening to her beg. She'd even spoken to him once or twice. He always promised to pass along her messages, but she couldn't tell if he was just pacifying her to free up the line. Then 6 months ago, Franz told Stella that her daughter had moved out. She's gone, he said, and I don't know where. She just left one morning, didn't even leave a forwarding address. There's still boxes of her things, and she won't even tell me where to send them. He seemed more inconvenienced by the junk he was storing than the fact that Kennedy had abandoned him. Stella panicked naturally, but weeks later, Blake received a postcard from Rome, written in their daughter's hasty scrawl. Went to find myself, she wrote. I'm safe, don't worry about me. The language bothered Stella most of all. You didn't just find a self out there waiting. You had to make one. You had to create who you wanted to be. So I'll stop there.
I liked very much this fragment because it says something essential about Stella and about what he decided to do, what she did. It's in fact a fragment about the courage to change, which is
Yes.
a very important values of this life.
Yes, I think so. And also I think it speaks to the difference between her and her daughter. You know, she has this frustration with her daughter's inability to figure out who she is, because from Stella's point of view, you are just whoever you determine that you want to be. Like, you choose who you want to be, and that's how you make yourself. And she feels frustrated with her daughter, thinking that she can like wander around Europe and just discover who she is. But at the same time, you understand why her daughter would feel so unmoored and so adrift, because the basis of her whole life has been a lie. So I loved sort of pulling out that tension in that relationship, because you can understand the perspective of both of those women and also understand why they can't see eye to eye.
Thank you very much, Britt Bennett, for accepting this invitation. We like very much to invite you in Romania once.
Yes,
and
I hope so. Yes,
it will be very soon. It is The Vanishing Half. It's an amazing novel that I read with great joy, and it became part of me. And I hope that our readers will enjoy it as much as I do, even more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.